Last week, our Washington Bureau reporter Taylor Popielarz was on the campaign trail with both candidates. Here's how Vance is making his final pitch to voters.
It is my honor and my privilege to introduce your next United States Senator, J.D. Vance.
In the final stretch of Ohio's U.S. Senate race, Republican J.D. Vance bringing Donald Trump Jr. into town to tour Ohio. The two wasting no time going after Vance's Democratic opponent, Tim Ryan.
On issue after issue after issue, he says in his well-produced TV commercials that he's one thing, but in D.C., Tim Ryan is a rubber stamp radical for Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden.
He has voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden.
Ryan has spent tens of millions of dollars on an aggressive TV ad campaign that bills him as a moderate Democrat.
Patriotism means supporting the American worker, which is why I voted with Trump on trade.
It's helped Ryan break fundraising records and keep the race statistically tied in independent polling, in a state Donald Trump won twice by 8 points. But Vance is quick to remind voters that Ryan has fully supported President Joe Biden's agenda, and he doesn't think polls can be trusted after undercounting Trump's support in the Buckeye State.
I don't think this race is that close. I think that Tim Ryan has sold a false bill of goods, that he's a moderate. He's tried to keep it close by lying to the people of Ohio. Unfortunately for him, I think the people of Ohio are much smarter than he bet on.
Across the country, some Republican candidates have made a shift. They ran to the far right in their primary elections, but are now running more toward the center in the general. But Vance never made a change. He's still campaigning closely with the Trump family and on a pro-Trump platform, and he thinks it will appeal to a wide array of voters.
Hey, guys. Hey.
In 3 events with former President Trump's son last week, Vance stuck to core Republican talking points like closing the border, supporting law enforcement, and bashing the media. He accuses Ryan of being two-faced, even though Vance has faced similar accusations for evolving from a self-described never-Trumper in 2016 to fully embracing the former president as Vance decided to enter politics.
One of those things is a change of heart. Another of those things is you're clearly just presenting yourself as a fraudulent moderate, as Don said, so you can win votes.
2016, don't forget, I'd say just about everyone in the Republican Party was skeptical of Donald Trump. JD is honest enough to come out and be like, hey, I was wrong. I didn't know that he'd be able to actually get those things done, and he did.
The former president held a rally for Vance in Northeast Ohio last month, describing Vance's evolution in blunt language. Leaning heavily on Trump can be a double-edged sword. While the strategy can excite Republican voters, it also can repel Democrats and some independents. Vance appears willing to take that risk in a state Trump carried twice. Perhaps not surprisingly, voters who came out to see Vance and Trump Jr. think Vance is smart to tie himself to the former president.
I'm a big Trump fan, so being aligned with the Trump family doesn't bother me.
So glad he now turned around, and I will vote for him no matter what.
Though Ryan has been raising more money than Vance, a new Trump-backed super PAC has launched ads to help Vance, and a group close to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is spending close to $30 million on advertising so Vance can keep up. Vance insists that running on a pro-Trump platform will be enough to win.
So I think at the end of the day, my argument, whether you love Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, is there are issues unacceptably going on in this country right now. We have a wide open border. We have a terrible crime problem, a terrible inflation problem. We don't have to live like this, but we need better leadership to prevent these issues.
In Perrysburg, Taylor Popielarz, Spectrum News.
And absentee voting by mail and early in-person voting, it begins Wednesday with one of the statewide races getting national attention. Polls showing Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Ryan locked in a dead heat for U.S. Senate with just 4 weeks to go. The winner will replace Republican Rob Portman, who is retiring.
Our Washington Bureau reporter Taylor Popielarz is just back from the campaign trail. His report on J.D. Vance aired Monday. You can go to our app and find out more about that one. But here's how Tim Ryan is making his final pitch to voters.
We need somebody to represent all of us, so Tim will be the one.
Congressman Tim Ryan making a stop in Columbus to visit with the city's Somali community, the second largest in the country.
You're a teacher?
Yeah, all right. I used to be a teacher.
What would you teach?
With less than a month to go until Election Day, Ryan, a 10-term Democrat from Northeast Ohio, is crisscrossing the state in a new campaign bus as he battles author and venture capitalist J.D. Vance, who's running as a pro-Donald Trump Republican.
So we've got a very close this race, so we absolutely want your support.
It's become increasingly difficult for a Democrat to win statewide in Ohio. Only Senator Sherrod Brown has done it in the last decade, but Ryan has been holding his own in this U.S. Senate race, in a state Trump won twice by 8 points. He's breaking fundraising records and saturating the airwaves with TV ads that cast him as a moderate who keeps his distance from President Joe Biden.
So when Obama's trade deal threatened jobs here, I voted against it. And I voted with Trump on trade.
Republicans criticize the ads as deceptive, saying Ryan has fully supported Biden's agenda. Vance responding with his own ad.
TV Tim Ryan pretends he's with you.
I don't answer to any political party.
But DC Tim Ryan votes with Biden Pelosi 100%.
Ryan argues there's evidence to show he's taken on his own party throughout the years.
I ran against Nancy Pelosi. I've gotten in fights with Bernie Sanders. I've taken on Democrats. I've opposed Obama's trade deals. I've opposed Biden on the Chinese tariff. I've opposed Biden on Title 42 on the border. I've opposed Biden's student loan. Like, it is very, very clear.
A key part of Ryan's strategy throughout this campaign has been reaching out to voters in places like this that don't normally support Democrats. He's hoping to win some of them over while keeping loyal Democrats on his side. In his official capacity as congressman, Ryan visited a farm in Northwest Ohio last week that's undertaking a project he helped secure funding for. He often touts his 2 decades representing Ohio in the U.S. House while labeling Vance as out of touch. A few minutes' drive from the farm, a plumbers and pipe fitters local union hall had Ryan campaign signs on display. They feel his message is resonating in traditionally Republican areas like this.
Tim Ryan's not a real extreme guy one way or the other, and I think that appeals to a lot of people that are undecided.
Back in Columbus, Democrats at the Somali voter meet and greet acknowledged Ryan's strategy could risk pushing away some of the party faithful.
It could. I sometimes have contemplated that myself because I consider myself a little bit more progressive. But at the same time, I totally understand where he comes from because you can't always be completely one way.
Ryan sees his approach as the only way a Democrat can once again win statewide in Ohio and help the Democratic Party keep control of the Senate.
We're never going to get out of this mess we're in, this polarization, if we don't start acting like Americans first and stop playing the political game. And that's what I'm doing, and that's why we're doing well in the polls, and that's why we're going to win this race.
In Columbus, Taylor Popielarz, Spectrum News.
We've had a lot of people donating food and drinks.
It was almost 10 o'clock Monday night outside the U.S. Capitol. But Susan Zier and fellow veteran advocates were not going anywhere. They've been camped here since last week, when a Senate vote on legislation to help veterans suffering from burn pit exposure unexpectedly failed.
We thought the bill passed on June 16th, and we celebrated. So to have this derailment really hurt.
The PACT Act is named after Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, Zier's son-in-law and an Ohio Army National Guardsman who died from lung cancer in 2020 after exposure to toxic burn pits while serving in Kosovo and Iraq. The bill would expand health care benefits to cover exposure to such toxins. The Senate easily passed it back in June, but more than 24 Republican senators who had voted yes flipped to no last week when it came up for a second vote, taking issue with the bill's funding language. Zier and her fellow advocates are furious.
They voted against my family. They voted for all of us to suffer.
Zier has been driving from Sandusky, Ohio to Washington since her son-in-law was diagnosed in 2017, making trip after trip to build support for the cause.
20 to 30, maybe more. I do know my husband put new tires on my car not too long ago.
A breakthrough moment came last March.
When my daughter Danielle was invited to the State of the Union, I mean, that was huge.
Danielle Robinson was First Lady Jill Biden's guest in honor of her late husband Heath. The Bidens believe their son Beau's cancer also was caused by burn pit exposure. Since then, the legislation has been on a glide path to Biden's desk until last week's vote. Zier had driven back to D.C. with her 9-year-old granddaughter Brielle to celebrate, only to have to continue advocating for her son-in-law, Brielle's dad.
I can feel him sitting on my shoulders. That's why wear his Army jacket when I'm on Capitol Hill or advocating, even if I'm in Ohio.
Zier has barely slept, but she's pledging to not stop until the bill becomes law.
This has actually been therapy for me, and I'm not sure I've fully grieved yet his death, because telling the story over and over makes you relive it and seem like it just happened yesterday. But as far as giving up, never.
In Washington, Taylor Popielarz, Spectrum News. Congress is a storied institution that rarely changes how it operates. But when COVID-19 changed our lives 2 years ago, it also changed how members of the House of Representatives can vote.
As a member designated by Ms. Stevens and Ms. Bustos, Mr. Blumenauer and Mr. Ryan, I inform the House that these members will vote yes on H-Res 1300.
This was Friday morning, and the last name Congresswoman Ann Kuster read was Ohio Representative Tim Ryan's. The longtime Democratic lawmaker was voting by proxy, meaning Kuster could cast his vote while he wasn't there in person. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi created proxy voting in 2020 before vaccines were widely available, but she's kept extending it even as life has largely returned to normal. Ryan has recently been voting by proxy while he campaigns for U.S. Senate back in Ohio. Here he is at events in Cleveland, Akron, and Canton earlier this week on days votes were scheduled on Capitol Hill. He voted remotely last week while in Ohio and then traveled to Philadelphia that night for an event with John Fetterman, the Democratic Senate nominee in the Commonwealth. Even though the proxy letter lawmakers have to submit each time states they can't vote in person due to the ongoing public health emergency, Ryan argues he's learned it can be useful beyond COVID-19.
I'm going to continue to use it. I mean, it's an opportunity for me to both be in Ohio, but yet cast my vote here. And, all offices have changed their protocols in the last, year or two because of the pandemic. Congress, surprisingly has changed a little bit too, and I'm going to continue to use it.
Voting records from the House clerk show Ryan has voted by proxy at least 25 days since last September. 12 of Ohio's 16 House members in both parties have voted remotely at least once, but Ryan tops the list. He's also now calling for proxy voting to be made a permanent option for members.
We've got a lot of responsibilities in our congressional districts, a lot of responsibilities here. Kids get sick, families, family issues. You should still be able to cast your vote. It's 2022. It's not 1800. Like, we should move on this.
Ryan told me he has not talked to House leadership about making proxy voting permanent, but he predicts some version of it will stay in place. Speaker Pelosi's office did not respond to a request for comment. J.D. Vance, the Republican running against Ryan for Senate, criticizes Ryan for voting remotely to campaign. After Ryan attended a rally in Dayton and events in Toledo and Portage County earlier this month, Vance put out a statement saying it's bad enough that he's refusing to show up to work, but it's truly disgraceful that he's lying to Ohioans about why he's not showing up for it. Still, proxy voting allows members not to miss votes entirely, avoiding what could be even sharper attacks on the campaign trail. Ryan says he has no shame in using proxy voting the way he is, even though he concedes nothing matches in-person legislating.
Nothing's like actually being here, but, with the technology today, there's no reason why we can't keep using it.
In Washington, Taylor Popielarz, Spectrum News.